I did expect that when we got a constitutional law professor to be the President of the United States instead of a guy who hadn't apparently read the Constitution ever, this would automatically make things better. It has not. Barack Obama is talking about Jesus frankly, more than George Bush did.
This is Faith Complex, a dialogue about the entanglement of religion, politics, and art.
Hello, my name is Jacques Berlittebaugh of Georgetown University, and you're watching Faith Complex. Joining us today is Reverend Barry Lynn, Executive Director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and he is also the author of Piety and Politics, The Right-Wing Assault on Religious Freedom. Reverend Lynn, welcome to Faith Complex.
Nice to be here.
Well, glad to have you, and it's just so nice to have a secularist in this chair. We rarely see secularists in these parts anymore.
Well, you know, I guess there's two kinds of secularists. There are those who say there is no God, and then there are those who say whether there's a God or not, we want the government of the United States to be secular. And I'm certainly in that latter category.
Right. You're not an atheist secularist, which is one type of secularist.
Absolutely, but I do think that atheists and believers can join together if they really understand the history of this country and understand that the best thing you can do for every ideology and every religion out there, the best thing you can do for government, keep a decent distance between the two.
So why don't you help us understand what a religious secularist is? I take it you're a reverend, you're a religious person.
No,
Tell us
absolutely.
What a religious secularist.
I think a religious secularist says, look, whatever my religion is, I'm going to tell you about it if you ask. Maybe occasionally, even if you don't ask. But I do not want the government, nor do I expect the government, to help me be religious. I don't expect it to pay. I don't expect the government to dump money into my collection plate. I don't expect my symbols to be placed on public property. I don't believe that my prayers ought to be prayed in a public school, or for that matter, at an inauguration of a president. I'll do that myself, thank you very much. Government barely can deliver the mail to the right house. I don't want it to run my religion for me.
And given what you've just said, I would surmise that 2010 has been a very, very difficult year for you. What are you looking at out there in terms of church-state transgressions?
Well, two big problems. Number one, I did expect that when we got a constitutional law professor to be the President of the United States instead of a guy who hadn't apparently read the Constitution ever, this would automatically make things better. It has not. Barack Obama is talking about Jesus frankly, more than George Bush did. The other big trend where the religious right doesn't have access to the people in power because there aren't Republicans in power, the truth is the Council of Catholic Bishops, for example, has exercised power within the so-called moral vacuum. Now they're speaking to Democrats. They're talking about why they oppose same-sex marriage, talking about anti-choice and reproductive matters. So they're filling the void. It's a big, big set of problems.
What did you expect? And what happened with the candidacy of Barack Obama and then the presidency of Barack Obama on the church-state issues that you've spent your life fighting for?
You kind of get a hint that something's going wrong when the president-elect decides to have Rick Warren, who really is just a religious right character, fundamentally different.
Well, he agreed to that debate, remember that?
Well, he agreed to a debate, and then the religious right basically set up the questions. Barack Obama did worse during the campaign at the Saddleback Church because the questions were setups. I mean, if I were on the religious right, I could have written those questions myself. During the campaign, we had 3 forums of one kind or another with most of the players seeking the presidency about religion. We didn't have one about science. I mean, I don't think we should have questions, what's the quadratic equation, Senator McCain? No, I don't remember that either. But I think we should have asked questions about science more so than we did about religion. Now, Barack Obama chooses as the first person to give a prayer on Inauguration Day Rick Warren, a guy who is homophobic, a man who has all kinds of attitudes that are not dissimilar from those of Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson.
All right, now you're a Georgetown University trained lawyer, and you know these issues inside out. Give us a sense, bring us to the cutting edge, litigation-wise. What's going on in the courts right now vis-a-vis this ill-fated, star-crossed Office of Faith-Based Initiatives and Neighborhood Partnerships?
Well, without getting too technical, it's very difficult to get what's called standing, the ability to even bring a lawsuit to challenge some of the faith-based activities because of some very bad decisions recently by the United States Supreme Court. One of the things we're litigating, though, is can you have a discriminatory hiring policy and still receive any government funds from all the taxpayers who ironically are all paying into a pot, but some of those taxpayers might be barred because of their religion or lack of religion from even getting the job that is on the table.
Right, but for the government to even monitor these programs, to me anyhow, it seems like the definition of excessive entanglement, no?
It's certainly excessive entanglement to me when you start looking at the bank books of a religious organization. A lot of these religious groups just mix the money from the government along with the money that they get from a small congregation or a donation through the mail. And ironically, this administration to date isn't even forcing them to keep separate books. It really would be good both for the church autonomy and integrity and good for the taxpayers to have a clean difference between government funds and private ones. But even there, so far, no go.
Can the IRS save us? I know that sounds like a very short. Often the IRS emerges as a beacon of neutrality because they're really interested in the bottom line in terms of 501c3 regulations. Is there anything the IRS can do to look at what's going on with money, the government, taxes, religion?
Even Richard Nixon couldn't corrupt the Internal Revenue Service. He tried to, but he couldn't do it. I think a lot of folks at the Internal Revenue Service take seriously a number of things about the scrutiny of charities, but religious groups have something special. They have something called the Church Audit Procedures Act, which basically means one more giant big stone in front of the door, making it more difficult for the IRS to come in and investigate.
All right, Barry, we could cry in our beer all night as secularists. We could invite Christopher Hitchens to join us, and he can cry into his whiskey. Secularism is it's in bad shape. Would you share my, I'm very sad about that, but I just think we're really in a bad way right now.
Well, when you look back over 50 years, we're all in good shape. I mean, the truth of the matter, Bill Maher made, I thought, a terrible film called Religulous. I mean,
really bad film.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't like to be hit on the head by documentary filmmakers. If I didn't get the point by the end, I don't need him to tell me. But it was a terrible movie, but I'm glad it's out there, and I'm glad a lot of people saw it. I'm glad people get it on DVD, because in 1950, he couldn't have found anybody to make that. In fact, if he wanted to publish a book about atheism, you couldn't get a private printer in most parts of this country to even print it, much less go to a major publisher and get your book on the bestseller list.
It's an interesting point, but let's say in 1962 or 65, could a presidential candidate or a senatorial candidate or a congressional candidate get so Christy on the campaign trail? I think we've gone in the reverse direction in the last 50 years. Or do you think?
I think there was an assumption in the 50s and until John Kennedy was running that presidents were just like people who went to church, just like you went to church. Everybody went to church. What do you mean there was somebody who didn't go to church?
It's called civil religion.
It's civil religion. God and government, almost the same thing. Abraham Lincoln started this idea. It was a bad idea then. It's an even worse idea now. Now, in the 60s, John Kennedy, running as the first Catholic presidential candidate with a real chance of success, says to a group of Baptist ministers a few months before the election, I believe in the separation of church and state as an absolute for America. I mean, he took a very strong stand. Some historians believe that that single speech, where he said he wasn't going to listen to the church on matters of public policy, and he wasn't going to listen, to the government on matters of religion, that was such a powerful speech that, in fact, it gained him the presidency.
In the let's get up off our asses segment of all of this, let's stop crying. How are we going to regenerate, rebuild, and renew secularism in the next decade? Reverend Lynn, you would know better than anyone.
I think one of the things that you do is you have to just get this on the radar screen, because there is an instinctive sense in this country that there's something wrong about too close a combination of religion and government. For example, when it turns out that Nancy Pelosi, progressive woman, Democrat, Speaker of the House, has representatives and attorneys for the United States Catholic Conference outside her office, in her outer office, writing legislation to be added to the health care bill a few hours later, further restricting a woman's moral right, as I see it, to reproductive choice in this country, then people who I'd never heard use the phrase separation of church and state are calling me up going, Barry, isn't this a violation of the separation of church and state?
Well, Reverend Lynn, secularism isn't perfect. I like to refer to it as the least awful option out there. We've made mistakes as secularists, and maybe there was a moment in American history where secularists had so completely scrubbed the public sphere of religion that perhaps, just saying perhaps, maybe we went overboard. So where is there a place for religion in public life?
Yeah, I think it's hard to find a place where the secular ideal went overboard. Okay. I think that there occasionally are things that happen, particularly amongst government bureaucrats. They do something wrong. They make a mistake. They say to a kid, don't read that Bible on the school bus, even though Stephen King you could read, but don't read the Bible. And those incidents do happen, but they're very, very rare. And usually they could be resolved by anyone committed to a basic constitutional understanding. So, but they become the horror stories that the other side uses to try to convince people that there's a massive assault on religion, that we're virtually powerless, that those of us who are religious, the church is going to be closed the next day if we don't somehow send them money and, I don't know, write our senator.
Something that causes some trepidation for me when I look at the secularist movement as it is constituted in the United States is that there is, how do I put this, an affluence of white dudes. Do you think that secularism might have a diversity problem, that we pull really from the same cohort, which is middle-aged white men, usually with advanced degrees?
I think that what we've found is that as more minority groups and minority religious groups become the subject of the animosity of the so-called religious right and others, that they say, well, wait a minute, how can we protect ourselves? So that even Muslims who do not come out of a tradition of separation of church and state or mosque and state do come up to us and say, well, how do you help us at least not become second-class citizens in our new country? So I think you'd find the diversity there, and I just found that also in the African American church, which sometimes gets labeled as, oh, well, they're really bad on the social issues. A lot of these church members that are members of Americans United as well are on our board and our chapters around the country, of 60 chapters around the country. They'll say, no, we understand it. This involves civil rights in the same way that some of the initial civil rights issues did. If you treat anybody for any reason as a second-class citizen, you're in a bad state of affairs. You're creating a country that's not right. It's not working. So, yeah, the African-American community, I think, is awakening to the strong sense that some of the folks who are fighting on these church-state issues are also the same people that 45 years ago were not marching with Dr. King, but were marching against him.
Our guest today has been the Reverend Barry Lynn, and you can hear him on his radio show virtually every day at www.cultureshocks.com. Reverend Lynn, thank you for being with us today.
Nice to be here.